aren't always as they seem.
Looking back on all the chances that I missed, some I held, some slipped away. One street over where my memories exist, I wondered what would change, I really couldn't say. In this life there's nothing certain, except the curtain that rises to the stage. Silly games of second guessing, I just forget the lessons that I couldn't learn. Because one street over there's a life I could have known that would have kept me from the one I had today. Except the curtain that rises to the stage. Silly games of second guessing, I just forget the lessons that I couldn't learn. Because one street over there's a life I could have known that would have kept me from the one I had today.
Robertson County, how are you doing? I guess I need to turn my mic up before I say, hey, good morning, y'all. This is 1100 WSG. I'm U-Turn Laverne. This is one street over, and it is a sauna out there this morning. Oh, my goodness. Normally, you see me donning a sweater. If I'm not wearing a sweater, you know it's hot because I'm very, very cold-natured. And so, oh, my goodness. And I'm glad I didn't have to wear a sweater today so I can show off my barbecue t-shirt, which makes it seem like I was there. But I didn't get to go because we had a baseball tournament. Now, I came for just a short time right at the beginning as y'all were setting up. Trent Cobb's in the house. Hey, Trent.
Hello,
good morning.
hello.
You're going to be seeing a lot of him because it is fair season. The fairgrounds are just busy. And so we had a slot this morning. I said, why don't you come on in and tell everybody who won the barbecue competition? But then we were talking at the fairgrounds Friday night, and I did not know there was an event coming up this weekend, right?
Yes.
It's this weekend.
June the 18th. Is that this weekend?
Yeah. It's this weekend.
Yeah.
It's this. Can you believe it's almost mid-June?
Yeah. It feels like
it is mid-June.
It feels like it's mid-August.
I know.
Right
I
now.
know. It's so hot out there. But it is a sauna, y'all. Get ready. It's going to be hot this week. Oh, we'll just, we'll talk about Corbin Creek here in a minute, but you got to water your plants, y'all. You got to water your plants right now.
Yeah.
Or they're going to die.
Water
all right?
your plants, water yourself.
Yes. Lots of hydration. Lots of hydration. It is summer in Tennessee. So, first and foremost, who won? Who won?
Grand champion was, and I got
And this is for the Kansas City barbecue.
This is for the Kansas City.
Okay. So who won?
My wife posted all of this stuff, and now my phone is not.
His phone's a glitching.
Glitching.
We're going to talk about a couple things while he's looking for this.
Pig Destroyer
was the overall winner.
Was the overall grand
Are they
champion.
local?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they're a local team.
Congratulations. So
Yeah.
they weren't my wastewater. What was my wastewater boys call themselves? Do you know? Because they had a name.
Big B and
Okay,
Brian.
that's right.
Yeah.
And I was really pulling for those
Well,
guys because
he
they're my
won,
neighbors,
he
man.
won reserve grand champion.
Congratulations!
Yeah.
Congratulations! That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, so Big
Yeah,
B
yeah.
was reserve grand champion. So two
Good job, guys.
local teams, won it from teams that were, maybe
Yeah.
a little distance away.
So what does reserve grand champion mean?
Well, you'd have to look up the Kansas City barbecue rules.
Oh, I got you.
But
I got you.
anyway,
But that's a big
the way
honor.
it works
I'm
is
sure
the
that's
boats.
probably a big deal. Yeah.
Because, like I say, there's four different categories.
Okay.
You have your chicken, ribs, pulled pork, and then a category called Anything But.
Oh, anything.
And they
Okay.
can enter any dish they want.
Okay.
And like I say, there's steak, there's shrimp, there's.
You said one time it was alligator.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's cool. That's
Yeah.
fun. Slide that way a little bit. I didn't do a good job putting my camera in. There you go. Make
better?
Make sure you on there good. Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't do a good job setting up the camera. But anyway, so what was the weirdest thing you had this time?
Really, I don't know because I got up there late.
Oh,
when I got
so
up
you didn't
there,
get to have all the fun
no,
stuff.
I had a few little morsels of some steak, and which was really, really good, and then something else. I really don't know what it was, but it was really good.
It's like mystery meat.
Yeah,
But
I'll eat
barbecued
anything.
it.
I'll eat anything.
Yeah, that's funny.
So
That's funny. That's great. But so very good. So you have all these different categories, and so those were our winners. Tell them again who was the winner and then the reserve winner.
Pig Destroyer was the
Okay.
grand
Overall,
champion.
Grand champion.
And then, like I say, Big B's Barbecue was reserve grand champion.
And that's
then,
my neighbors at the wastewater plant.
Yeah.
What to go?
So, and they also have, posted it on our Facebook page, and I think Chad will probably share it to the Fairgrounds Facebook page. Diana took pictures and they broke them down in the categories.
Okay.
It's first through fifth place.
Okay.
And every single one of them wins money.
So how many entries did you have?
There was 27 teams.
Okay.
There was 27 teams in the actual Kansas KCBS. I'm going to quit. I'm starting to do that on your table again. On your KCBS barbecue competition.
Okay.
And then there was 22 entries in the wings Friday night, which was phenomenal.
I know. I wish I could have been. I like I said, I was there for a minute, and then I had to
she
leave
was
and
there,
go watch
yeah.
baseball. But I said I'd come, and so I did stop by. But
That's right. We huge crowd.
I'm
Everybody.
thrilled. That's wonderful.
Everybody was, enjoying themselves
Yeah.
down there. I know donation-wise, and just round numbers, money put in the jars for Isaiah 117 and my father's house was $2,100.
Awesome.
And then on our T-shirts,
Yep.
right here, T-shirt sales, which it was donations.
Right.
It was another $600 worth of those. So,
Awesome.
yeah. So,
Awesome. Yeah, you got my T-shirt and my wing money since on the T-shirt since we didn't get to eat any wings, so we figured
Yeah.
So anyway, that's awesome. But I love it. And do y'all still have some T-shirts? Because they're cool.
Yes. Yeah.
They're
We still have
fun.
some now. As with any barbecue contest, all of the 3X, 2X, and extra large are
gone?
probably pretty much gone. Yeah. So, and it's funny when we first started this 5 years ago. When we ordered the T-shirts, I don't think we got any 3X T-shirts. And then
That's a
Perry
no-no.
said, "You messed up. You got to have some 3Xs."
Yeah,
'cause
these big old boys
Yeah.
like to cook their barbecue, and they're big boys.
they are.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
are. So.
it tends to be guys. Did you have any women out there barbecuing?
Well, there was several husband and wife teams.
Okay, because I
out
didn't
there.
see
Yeah.
the girls out there,
Yeah.
and so I just find that interesting when you see barbecue competitions. My guys are wanting to do it. So I mean, that's all we talked about this weekend. We were together all weekend because of the baseball tournament, and we had a baby. We had a baby queue yesterday because I got a grandson going to be born on July 7th. You know how they set the date now and deliver the baby, and so
Yeah,
but
everything's on a schedule now.
But that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Everything
Yeah.
stays healthy and wonderful. But anyway, so we were doing that this weekend. So the talk was barbecue all weekend because of y'all. And so my guys are going, we want to do this. And I'm like, well, it's going to be baseball season again next year. So, if you can talk them into, finishing early so we can and not be a conflict for us. But, and you just never really know how the calendar is going to fall. So hopefully we'll be free next year. But so what is for those who are wanting to plan to do this, is it a big? I mean, you've got to have a good recipe. You got to come to the table with something fabulous.
Yeah.
And so, is it a big commitment money wise? Is it something you need to save up now for?
It's not a huge commitment money wise. Like,
Yeah.
In the People's Choice categories.
Okay, for the wings. Yeah.
Or the barbecue on Saturday morning, it's a $20 entry fee. Is
Well,
all it
that's
is,
nothing.
and you get the meat provided.
Yeah.
The Boston butt is provided when you pay your $20 for the People's Choice, and then the wings are provided.
Okay, so if you're not going to be in the big barbecue, you could actually come out, pay $20 to do the wings and $20 to do the butts. Could you do that?
Well, no, actually, I don't know. Me and Perry hadn't talked about that.
Yeah, because there's
possibly
some novice.
could.
There's
Yeah.
some novice that are like, I don't
Yeah.
think I'm ready for a big competition, but I'd like to
Yeah.
put my butt out there and see if the youngins
Yeah,
go.
so
But
you
put
know,
my Boston butt out there and see.
we opened it to the wing competition to the public this year because two reasons. We was afraid that, and it was close. You know, we wanted to have enough entries for the people that were coming, you know,
Yeah.
because this event grows bigger and bigger every
You bet.
year.
You don't wanna run
So,
out.
yeah, if you only got like 10, 15 teams competing,
Oh, you run out.
yeah, then you're going to run out. So, and wings are easier because
Yeah.
it doesn't take as long.
Right.
You know, I mean, you can come, you know, 2-3 hours before the contest actually starts and get your wings on and get them cooked. Now, unless you're deep frying, then, you know, you only have to come 20 minutes before.
True.
So,
Yeah,
but,
exactly.
yeah. So,
But now yours were fabulous looking. I mean, they looked wonderful.
Well,
You kind of did. They did well.
yeah, they did well. Obviously, well, I wasn't in the top money, and I really didn't care. I was just doing it just because.
Yeah.
You know, I love to cook them, and, you know, now, Hole in the Wall Gang, it was A, B, C, and D. They had 4 different entries.
Okay.
They won the wing competition with,
Okay,
with
the
the most
People's
money.
Choice.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't remember the exact dollar, but they had the most money in their jar. And then the second one was Wolf's Den, which is in Cross Plains.
Okay. Wolf's Den.
Wolf's
Okay.
Den. Look it up on Facebook. My buddy Jamie Nixon.
Okay.
He does their stuff too.
Okay.
So
Okay.
you can really good stuff.
Well, who won the People's Choice for the Boston Butts on Saturday?
It's on Saturday. I'm gonna have to look that up.
See if you can find, because that was
Yeah.
one thing we were talking. I guess I think you texted me yesterday. That was a question I should have followed up with.
Yeah.
Because you had 2 People's Choice, but man, maybe you want to do that next year where you can do just the wings and just the butts, because for somebody like my family that's
Yeah.
again novice,
Yeah.
my son would be like, no, I'm the best.
Yeah.
But I have a son that has a big green egg, and he cooks. Him and his dad, boy, they think they're it. They're good. They're good. I mean, they do
Yeah.
some seriously good barbecue.
Yeah. Did
So
you
I
have a
think
chance to walk up through?
Yes.
Before you left
Yes,
Friday.
yes. We walked through and talked to some folks and saw some of the stuff that they had going on. Still haven't seen anything that compares to my brother-in-law's old refrigerator that's been modified to be a smoker. You know,
Yeah.
I mean that's
So-
just one of those silly things. It's just fun.
Yeah.
We
so-
gotta bring the
and-
Northerners down.
yeah, and-
Got to bring them down. for
And
the
you'll
competition.
notice as you're up there, you'll see some really high dollar people that sink several thousand.
Oh, yes.
not several, lots of thousands
Yeah.
of dollars into all their cooking equipment, and then you'll see some with this tent set up. You know, with smokers out there,
Sure, just
some
basics.
homemade, some store bought. But at the end of the day, they're all just within. I would hate to be a judge now because everything that
Yeah.
I tasted this weekend was unbelievable.
Yeah.
Actually, after the contest was over, the little secret is, several of us Fair Board members, while we're cleaning up inside there, they have all these trays of ribs and barbecue and chicken and all that. And there were some ribs up there that, unbelievable.
Oh,
I don't know
really?
whose they were, but I was sitting there cleaning up and they said, you got to come over here and try these. I said, no, I will in just a minute. I just put a fresh chew tobacco in and all that. He said, it's worth spitting out that chew tobacco. So I did, and unbelievable. So
Man, oh man! So if you chew tobacco and they tasted that good, for those of us who don't put that stuff in your taste buds are better. I'm just gonna.
Oh, yeah.
I'll give you a hard time over that tobacco now.
yeah,
So,
it's
I bet your wife does too.
she does more for the money because it's extremely expensive habit now. So,
Oh, I know. I'm just giving you a hard time. But okay, so we're talking. We had to get an update on the barbecue, but now so if you can find the
I found it. I found
who
it.
was the People's Choice on the butts?
No, I'm sorry, I did not find that. I thought you was fixing to jump into the Jeep and Janet.
Okay, let's talk Jeep and jamming. Yes, that's
Yeah.
where I was going to go. But if you do, if
I will-
Donna,
yeah,
if
I
any of
will-
you guys are listening, give us who won on the butts. But here we want to make sure that we stay up to date on everything going on at the fairgrounds because man, there's stuff going on every weekend. It seems like just about. I'll tell you, let's go ahead and pause. Let me do Corbin Creek real quick, and then we'll transition into Jeep and jamming if you don't mind. So let's talk Corbin Creek Greenhouse Gifts and Gardening Center because if you've gotten anything that you've purchased there, you got to water it. You got to water it. Hey, you got to water it. I've already watered everything that I have. I'm hanging on to some plants that I picked up from Mother. She wanted some more lilac and some things like that I was afraid they were going to sell out of. And so I'm going to see Mom in a week, but I've been watering these plants like crazy, making sure I keep them alive because I'm notorious for killing stuff. And so, I mean, right now, this week, you really need to get out there either in the evening or the morning and water every day because it's just that hot. And it doesn't look like we've got rain in the forecast for about a week. So if you do not water this stuff, guys, it is not going to thrive. And just go out and talk to Amy about how you can, give it a little fertilizer, a little something extra that will make it just grow beautifully. I was watching a video from Corbin Creek the other day, and she opened up, she was talking about as Father's Day is approaching, they did a little video talking about dad, and she was talking about the best advice her dad gave her for her business was your roots matter, and that's such a good. That's just such a good foundation for life too. But really have good roots as for the things that you're trying to grow in the world. But anyway, I digress. But she turned the pot over and she opened it up, in the root system in the pots that she sells, how healthy it was. And she says she'll go into other places that sell plants and she'll turn them over and look at the root system, and none compare to what you're going to pick up at Corbin Creek because that root system is strong. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of their plants will thrive in the heat, even if you neglect to water them a little bit, because they've got a healthy root system that's stored up some water. That's crucial when it comes to plants that you're going to bring into your yard, into your garden, a healthy root system. And that's what you're going to find at Corbin Creek. But water. Can't say it enough right now. And while you're out there, check out their CBD products, a game changer for those of us with arthritis. It really can help you tremendously if you've got inflammation issues, if you have trouble sleeping. A lot of things that are going on in your body can really be helped by something natural that is CBD oil that is derived from the Robertson County plants that are grown right out there at Corbin Creek by her brother Bill. So get out there and talk to them. Monday through Saturday, they're open Monday through Sunday from 9 to 6:30. I know Miss Jane's not been doing great lately, so please keep Miss Jane in your prayers. And sometimes, if she's ailing, their hours might vary. So, be gracious of that and know that they got to take care of Miss Jane first. But go and see them at 4920 Highway 161, 4920 Highway 161. And they're always at the farmer's market. When you go by there, always tell them U-Turn sent you. Okay, Jeep and Jammin'.
Wait a minute. I did find it finally.
Who won the butt competition the People's Choice on
winner,
Saturday?
Is Serious Hog.
Serious Hog. Awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah, Serious Hog. So
and that's just bragging rights.
That's bragging rights right there.
And you raise money.
Yeah, you go down some of the names. I love the names. There's Small Bash Barbecue, Big B, Smoke It in the Country, Blinky's Offset Barbecue. The names of these teams.
Yeah.
Like I say, Pig Destroyer, M1 Smoking Guns. They won down there in the ribs category. Not first place, they won second place in that. But just the names of some of these names. That's a veteran-owned.
Oh, cool.
So
very cool.
Stuff like that, I really enjoy seeing.
Well, and I guarantee you, the Vivios at some point are going to be doing something because they're just already talking. And so I wonder what kind of name they'll come up with. That will be interesting to see.
Yeah, you got to come up with something.
Yeah, they'll come up with something interesting.
Okay.
So,
but
anyway, Jeep and Jammin'.
Jeeping and Jammin' this Saturday, June the 18th at the Robertson County Fairgrounds. And it's basically what you would call just a big cruise in for Jeeps.
Okay.
David Rainwater with Outdoor Power Equipment in, Barren Plains had this last year.
At his place, right? Didn't he have it at his place and
Yes,
it outgrew it?
He had it at his place,
right?
And outgrew it. I mean,
Quickly.
In the first year.
Yeah.
Of course, Jeep people are, and I drove mine this morning too. No top, no doors,
Just for
nothing like
fun.
that. So,
Yeah.
I am a Jeep person. So,
I have a friend in California who has one of those crawler Jeeps that climbs on rocks and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. Oh yeah, she's intense.
yeah.
She's
So
intense.
I am not a 100% just absolute crazy Jeep person, but I really love. Well, actually, Dinah loves our Jeep. That's the one thing that it doesn't matter. If I've got something else that breaks down or we need to get fixed or something like that, well, what's that going to cost? With the Jeep, it does not matter. She says, I don't care what it costs.
Keep it on the road.
Keep it on the road.
I love it.
Yeah, because that's her stress relief.
I love it.
We'll sometimes in the late afternoon or on the weekends, we'll drive it down to the farmer's market. We drive to church on Sundays. She has to keep her hair all tied up, so she'll look presentable going into church on Sunday mornings. But
that sounds like fun.
yeah,
That sounds
very
like fun.
very
Maybe
seldom.
I'll have to get me a Jeep.
Very seldom put the top and the doors on it.
Oh, okay.
It's just they stay off of it.
Why have a Jeep if you're going to put the top and the doors on it?
Yeah,
right?
no, they're not real
Why
Jeeps.
why have a Jeep?
And I'm going to make some people mad. They have automatics, and I say that's not a real Jeep. If it's got an automatic transmission, it's not a real Jeep. So
Okay, Paul Rainey is wanting to know if you've been ducked.
yes, I have.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
Well,
I can guess.
It's duck Jeep is basically what it is, and Jeep owners, they go around and you keep the little rubber ducks. That you find at the fairs and stuff like that to float.
Okay.
And you'll set it on somebody's Jeep in the parking lot. If you see somebody's Jeep sitting out there, you
set a duck on there.
You put the duck on it.
Okay, somebody who is not a Jeep person, I thought maybe it means you had a duck come flying in with you or something.
No,
because I've actually had to dodge ducks on more than one occasion in my car, so that's what I figured that was a common thing. So I didn't know.
And like I say, you're supposed to just pass them around, and it's just kind of a neat little.
You've been ducked. I love it. That's cute.
Yeah. So, but yeah, there's going to be live music, vendors. It's free admission, and there's trophies and raffle prizes going on.
Very fun.
So, Bad Boy Mowers, which is, outdoor powered equipment. Whit's Barbecue will be there. BMS Off-Road. I wish my eyes were a little bit better. 36 Uptown something.
There's some readers. I don't know if they're the right ones.
I don't mind. Yeah, I've got.
And they're flowery, so they'll be really cute.
Yeah, oh, yeah, that's much better.
See there you go. See, I love it.
Uptown. Well, it was, but
I think they're probably
graphics. Uptown Graphics, Gupton Motors, Chick-fil-A will be down there, Kona Ice.
God's Chicken.
Yeah, God's Chicken will be down there. And a couple others that I'm not really don't know what they do or what they're for, but I'm sure it has something to do with food or Jeeps.
Okay. Sounds like
or
fun.
lawnmowers.
Do you know what the hours are? Did you say the hours?
Yeah, it is 10 to 3.
10 to 3.
So it goes on a pretty good while.
10 to 3. Yeah.
Saturday.
Good time.
And like I say, literally just drive in. Costs you nothing to come down there. There'll be, I'm going to go out on a limb and say hundreds of Jeeps down there.
Wow, really?
Jeep people are crazy.
Okay. I've got a friend that's got a Jeep, Darlene. Just wonder, maybe she'll bring hers down.
Yeah. I mean, just come on down.
Yeah. Well, and Todd Hibbs, you got a Jeep. I've got 2 or 3 people from my church that have Jeeps that just pop in my mind. And Todd, he's here in Roxton County. He's one of us, so maybe he'll go out there.
Yeah.
But so Todd Hibbs, Darlene Sweet, get your Jeep out.
Get your Jeep out. Yep. Come on down to the fairgrounds. That's the next big event, and then after that we have the 4th of July celebration on July the 3rd. The Sunday, July the 3rd, will be the
What are the hours? Like, when will the gates open and all that? I'm asking you the tough questions.
Yeah, I know, asking
Trent.
me tough questions.
Yeah.
I want to say sometime right around just mid-afternoon,
Okay.
2-3 o'clock, something like that, because they'll have concerts going on, and then the headliner is the Oak Ridge Boys that night, and then as soon as the Oak Ridge Boys go off stage, then you start the fireworks show.
Okay, very good. It's going to be a good time. It's going to be an excellent time.
Yes.
And just again, you're going to be seeing Trent a lot, or somebody from the Fair Board will be here a lot, because we've got all this stuff coming on, and we want to make sure you know what's happening, and none of this, well, there's nothing to do in Robertson County, because that's just a lie. This is a lie.
Now, look, luckily I took my blood pressure pills before I got there, because whenever somebody says that to me,
just makes your blood pressure rise.
Yeah, you get out and ride around. You look at our parks.
Yeah.
You look at what the city provides.
Yeah.
What different people, like this weekend, our barbecue contest was free to the public, and the movies that we'd play on Friday nights at the fairgrounds, free to the public.
Yeah.
This event this weekend, free to the public. I mean,
come on.
You complain about nothing to do. Not only do we have a lot of things to do, but most of the things are free.
You bet. Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
Anyway.
And I'm going to tell you about Veterans Motorplex, and you can get some free tickets to that here, and I'm going to talk about that as you finish up. But something you mentioned that I just, because you're in the in crowd, I guess, in Robertson County, so you know things, and you're a builder. Are we getting a Chick-fil-A? You mentioned Chick-fil-A. I've heard rumors that we might get a Chick-fil-A.
There's rumors, but
is God's Chicken coming to Robertson County, which is God's country? We need God's Chicken here.
We do. I mean,
really do. And I'm not somebody that I don't eat Chick-fil-A really, but I know I love their company. I love their model. I just don't eat a lot of fast food.
Yeah.
But everybody loves it. My grandkids love it. I want it for my grandkids, if nothing else.
I know.
I want God's Chicken to come to Robertson County just so I can treat my grandkids.
There you go. So I don't really know. I'm not going to say for sure on that one there.
But I've heard. So if anybody's in the know, we would love to hear from you. I guess I get Margot back in here from the industrial board. See if she knows anything about that. She'd be one that would be in the know. So anyway, go ahead. I digress. Yeah, we need to wrap it up here.
I just wanted to thank everybody from the Robertson County Fair Association and Cobb Hill Homes for a phenomenal weekend.
Absolutely.
This past weekend. I mean, we raised lots of money for two worthy organizations. And real quick, the reason we do this, after everything was over Saturday morning, Saturday, the People's Choice, me and Dinah and a few others were down there cleaning up, and there was a young couple down there. And they was eating some barbecue, and when they got through, they was the last ones down there, them and a couple other people sitting at a table. When they got through cleaning their stuff up, they started folding up their chairs and their table. I said, no, you don't have to do that. We'll get that. And he said, no, I want to help. And because he said, real quick, he said that he volunteers for my father's house. So obviously no names, but he volunteers down there. He said because a year and a half ago, he was in my father's house. And he went through their program. They helped him. He now has his kids back. He has a good job. He has a house. And you'll choke up hearing these kinds of stories.
Wow.
Because if that's why we do it.
Amen.
And if you save just one person, it's all worth it.
That's a great testimony right there.
Yes.
Oh, I love that story.
Yeah. So that's
y'all.
That's why we at the fairgrounds and Cobb Hill Homes do what we do.
I love it. Outstanding. Great weekend. I wish I could have been there more than just the minute that I was there, but anything y'all do, it's on my calendar, and I try my best to get there because, man, we have got an amazing community here in Robertson County. No reason to go anywhere else for your entertainment. And the fairgrounds is going to be right in the heart of it.
That's exactly right.
All summer. Awesome. Thank you, Trent. Appreciate you.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm going to go ahead and do an ad here, and we're going to get ready for Congressman John Rose is going to be calling us. Thanks, Trent. God bless you. Congressman John Rose is going to be calling us just any minute, and before he does call us here, I want to go ahead and talk to you about another one of our sponsors, which I kind of teased a little bit, and that is the folks over at Veterans Motorplex, because we were talking about the things that are available for free. Well, if you don't win tickets, it's not free. But we are told, Jerry tells us every week we can give up to 4 sets of tickets away. And what a set of tickets involves is that you get a family pack of tickets. You're going to be able to get in 2 adults and up to 4 minor kids when you get a family pack of tickets. Now, if you purchase that, it's $40. What a great deal. It's like $5 a piece to go to the races and enjoy great entertainment. I had no idea how much fun it was going to the races. We went a couple weeks ago. And I was just, if you follow me on Facebook and watch for the show, I apologize because I kept putting up videos. I probably should have just put up 1 or 2. But I was so intrigued watching those cars fly around that little track. It's exciting. It's just heart pounding. And you pick your favorite and you start rooting along. We were kind of sitting in a group that they had somebody they were following. So we were rooting for him too. And there was at one point they had some teenage kids. There was a 13-year-old girl out there running around that track and something. And I think I forget what car she was driving, but it was kind of the younger version of it, but it's just a lot of fun. They're always doing big wheel races, and they'll have specials. They had dollar hot dogs this past weekend. Fabulous food out there. But it is Veterans Motorplex. The gates open every Saturday. They're in their season right now through November. They open at 4 p.m. The qualifying starts at 4:30, so you'll start seeing things going around the tracks that early. But then the throwdown racing starts at 6, and it will go all through the night for about 2.5, 3 hours, and you're going to have fun. It's exciting. It's just a wonderful time. If you want to go, message me in the comments, or you can give me a call, 615-594-7736, 615-594-7736, and text me, because if you call me and I don't recognize your number, I'm not going to pick it up. But if you text me, I'll set some tickets aside for you. You can go this weekend. They're at 3183 Kelly Willis Road in Greenbrier. My friend Jerry Criswell is the head of Veterans Motorplex, and he wants you to come out and enjoy the fun. And you will just fall in love with racing. I did when we went out there the other day. So we are waiting for the congressman to give us a call. Congressman John Rose, of course, in the middle of all kinds of crazy stuff in Washington. It is the season right now that we are approaching an election. And what's going to be really interesting in this election, if you have not paid attention to the redistricting, let me just kind of lay it out for you. We won't be voting for John again in this county because we have been moved over to the district that is represented by Mark Green, Congressman Mark Green. And so while John will be representing us through the first of the year, so it won't be until the new House is seated in January that we will actually change over and actually have Mark is our congressman. And that's if they win their elections, of course. You know, we do have the general election. We've been through our primary, the general elections coming up in the fall. So you've got all that happening. But we will be changing districts in January. So when that happens, what we will again change, and we'll reach out to we'll reach out to Mark Green's office, Dr. Mark Green's office, and we will see if we can't get him to work with us as well as John has been. But with all that said, because we're in election year, because we do have this coming up, what's going to happen is there's just going to be a lot going on. It's going to be kind of busy, and you're going to have just a lot of game playing too. Let's hear is John calling right now.
John.
And we've got you on. John, are you there with us?
Good morning. How are you this morning?
I'm doing excellent, sir. How was your weekend?
Very good, very good. I've got a little bit of a cold from one of my boys, but as you know, that goes with the territory.
Yeah, tell them how old your kids are.
I have a 4.5-year-old and a 1-year-old.
They're so cute. They're just precious. I just love them. They're just so much fun to watch. You are having so much fun, and we appreciate you so much. I was just kind of explaining to people while we were waiting for you to call that you are, while you're our congressman right now, we're not going to get the opportunity to vote for you in the general. We're going to be voting in the new district. And so while you're representing us through the end of the year, we'll be making that switch. So people need to understand, people get confused on this kind of stuff. And so when it comes to the general this fall, we're going to be voting in a different district. So, and we got a flyer in the mail from you. I was very surprised to see that because I thought, well, bless his heart, he is still reaching out to us, even though you didn't have to do that.
Well, of course, we want to, as I told you, I think the last time we talked, it's my job to represent Robertson County until January 3rd, and we're going to work hard all the way till the end.
Well, I appreciated the fact that we got that because, again, that's campaign money you didn't have to spend on us, and but I think that's just a testimony to how proactive y'all have been in our community, and I hear that again and again and again, and I hope Congressman Green realizes he's got some big shoes to fill for Robertson Countyans. He really does, because all I have heard from people that have met you and met Ray Render's your deputy in this area, and met Chelsea and the kids. They just love you guys, and they're going to miss having you be our representatives. So, yeah, you need to let Mark know he's got some big shoes to fill. So you just tell him I said that. I haven't met him yet. I got to reach out and meet him as well, but we do appreciate you, and I'm going to say that again and again between now and the end of the year. But I just think people need to realize how it's going to look different on that primary. We're going to be voting in the district represented by Congressman Mark Green. So with that said, there's a lot going on, sir. Lots happened since we spoke, hasn't it?
Yes, indeed. It's and most of it, unfortunately, not positive.
No.
So happy to talk about any of the issues. So I'll let you tell me where you'd like us to go today.
Well, honestly, and I was your communications people reached out to me, and I said, honestly, we're fine with you kind of addressing the situation. I know one of the primary things that I saw over the weekend is this very scary notion that the Senate is piecing together some kind of compromise for gun legislation. And so I think we're all kind of taking a breath on that, going, please no. I mean, you see what happened in Texas, and everybody starts screaming for gun control, and that's just I am so Second Amendment. I just like you. I grew up. You're a little bit younger than me, but we grew up in an era where kids had their deer rifles in the back of the car. I mean, we just didn't even think about gun control. And it's not gun control. It is mental health. It's just, it's a heart for God. I mean, that's what's going on. You cannot legislate what's missing in our country. You cannot legislate it. And I don't know. But with all that said, I told your communications guys, I said, I really just want to say, here's Congressman John Rose, and just kind of let you talk about what you want to talk about, because there's so much right now. So where do you want to go, sir?
Well, so I think it's a good place to start with the question of the response to Uvalde, Texas, and the now familiar call from the left to turn to gun control and taking away, frankly, Second Amendment rights in response to a mass killing like we saw in Uvalde. And as is so often the case, all the facts aren't in yet, so it's probably a little bit early to be thinking about policy prescriptions for that that would address that particular situation. But we know early on the shooter, in this case, again, was mentally ill, had a history of violence. He had been cut off from his family, absent from school for almost 2 years. And so law-abiding gun owners should not have to give up their rights for an inexcusable action or actions by one individual. And we see this, up and down the line when it comes to these mass killing events, particularly when guns are used, that the first call is, let's take away Second Amendment rights. And so I just want everyone listening to know that I am a steadfast believer and defender in our Second Amendment rights. I see them not so much as about allowing each of us to have the right to possess firearms to defend ourselves from one another, although I think that's a very important part of what the Second Amendment affords us. But I think what the Founding Fathers were worried about, and we see this throughout the Constitution, indeed the entire structure of the Constitution was envisioned to protect us from tyrannical government. They had just fought a long, hard, difficult battle to free themselves from the tyranny of British rule, and they did not want to be at risk of that again. And the Second Amendment was one of the pieces that they put into the Bill of Rights to make sure that didn't happen. And I think it has worked. There's a reason why this is the longest-lasting republic in the history of the world, and I think that and that democracy has remained in place as the way that we pick our leaders in this republic. And so I think we need to defend those Second Amendment rights. If you think, and U-turn, I'll just veer off here for a minute on this. If you think about ways that we could stop mass killing events and what are all the possible reactions, and I'm not advocating for some of these, but I just note them. If you think about mass killing events, almost always the people who commit them are not regular church attenders.
Amen.
And so what if we said everyone has to go to church? We would never do that, but what if we said that? That could be a prescription. I don't hear the left saying that, but if we're looking for kind of a one-to-one correlation between these events, we could find one there. What if we said, press, these people who commit these mass killing events often are doing so. In fact, almost always they appear to be doing so because they want to go out kind of in a blaze of glory, you might say. They want a lot of attention. They want to be in the media. What if we said to the media, like Major League Baseball incidentally has said about the individuals who run across the field during a game, they no longer allow that to be broadcast because they came to understand that people were mimicking one another. Just like you may, a little before my time, but U-turn, you'll remember, and a lot of people listening will remember the era of streaking on college campuses.
I knew you were going there.
And people did that because it became kind of the popular thing to do, frankly. But it eventually ceased, and because frankly the public got bored of hearing about it. But these events, I think, each person who comes along wants to do something more spectacular and heinous than the last person, so that they can go down in history in some way, I guess. As a means of crying out. And so we need to focus our attention on the issues that really underlie the problem here, which is mental illness. Because we probably can't catch every situation, we need to take reasonable steps to make sure that the most unprotected in our society are protected. So our children that are in schools and teachers, we need to make sure that we do what we can to protect those schools. And then we need to really settle in on focusing in this country on identifying those who are mentally ill, getting them treatment when they need it, and addressing a problem now decades old in this country after we closed our mental hospitals, and I won't revisit that issue right now, but we started closing our mental hospitals 30, 40 years ago because, frankly, progressives thought that was the wrong way to deal with mental illness. But what we put in its place obviously is not working fully, and we need to get focused on taking care of those people who have long run mental illness, and I think those are the answers. And it's sad to see that yet again we return. And the last thing I'll say, you may have some follow up that you want to do, but the last thing I'll say is what we know also about these mentally ill people who commit these mass killing events. If they didn't have a gun available to them, that they could get legally, they'll get one illegally, number one. And number two, if they can't get a firearm in their hands, they'll use some other means to commit the heinous act that they want to commit.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that's one of the things, because, some of the things that we were talking about I think the guy who was going to had on his mind to assassinate Judge Kavanaugh, was he not armed with a knife? Or I think did he have a gun? Or
he had a gun.
He did have a gun.
A knife.
Okay. I was thinking I had only heard about the knife.
I think, this is probably a classic case that illustrates the point. There is some security around the Kavanaugh home, and I think when he got there, he realized he was going to face, it wasn't going to be easy. And so, he essentially turned himself in because I think he realized he had a mental illness problem, and maybe in a moment of clarity, he sought help. He was crying out for help, and this was his way of doing so. And again, a classic situation that we see. And what's sad on that front is that, if and we've seen this, not protecting our Supreme Court members and not calling out the demonstrators that are going to their homes when that's clearly illegal, You can demonstrate about the issues of the day, but what you can't do is go threaten public officials, particularly Supreme Court justices, to try to influence their decision. And that's clearly what these folks, I mean, when you're standing in front of a Supreme Court member's house, harassing that member and their family and potentially threatening their safety and security with a sign that says what you want them to do, it's pretty clear what your intent and purpose is, and that's against the law. And it's not against the law to protest. There are plenty of places you can do that, but you can't threaten the safety and security of these members of the court. And the fact that the other side is not willing to call that out, the president has not called that out.
It's incredible.
His people have not called that out. The attorney general has not pointed this out. And you know that disrupting the structure of the court to achieve an outcome you want, that is insurrection by definition.
Yeah.
And it's funny that we're having public hearings about something that wasn't an insurrection while we're simultaneously ignoring something that might well be an attempt at an insurrection in this country.
Just so many things that you said, sir, and just such great points that you made just in the last 10 minutes. If you missed any of this, you really need to go back and hear it. But before we completely leave the question of, we were talking about the shooting down in Texas, the point you made about the mental health facilities being closed about 40 years ago. I hadn't really thought about looking at that date versus the date of the rise of these shootings and how that it's escalated. Of course, I think probably in the last 20 years especially. But working with the homeless population, like I do, and the work that I do, and seeing the results of those closures, of not having facilities for people who are having mental issues, it is breathtaking that people are not talking about what you just said, and that is, we've got to have a place to work with those who are mentally ill, and when you see it, you've got to be able to address it. And I just don't think there's ever been enough that's been a light shined on what that closure has meant to our society. It's breathtaking. But do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah. And it's long past time that we address that, and so we've just got to show, we've got to show that this country is willing to stand up and really address these issues that we're facing, because if we don't, we're going to continue to see this. And while I'm not suggesting that we should stop the press from covering the news of the day and the important events, I think they do have to be, in all seriousness, I think they do have to be mindful about, and I know some members of the press are careful about this, but, they need to be mindful that there's a reason folks do this, and to some degree the press is feeding into it when they give them what they're seeking, which is notoriety.
Yeah, and, it's just, when you were talking about the things that they want to regulate and that they want to do, and it's always the guns and not the mental health. It's not the societal things that I love your correlation between people who actually believe in God and attend church and have that church family versus the ones that are out that have performed these terrible acts. And another thing too is, when will they come to and say that, maybe some of the things that are being put out in the media, there's a popular television show called Stranger Things, and their opening scene is this terribly graphic scene of children being killed. And my husband and I both, we have in the past watched that, and we turned it on and we were just shocked that somebody hasn't said, what about that? What about that? What effect is that having on the mental health of people who are watching that kind of stuff? And it's just, there's tons of it out there. And why do they not look at that as well? It's always got to grab the guns, got to get the guns. But anyway, I digress, and this is your time. I'm not going to go off on my little diatribe here. But some of the things that I want to get to is, number one, too, is when we talk about the Second Amendment, how you have stood firmly in defense of it, and we do appreciate that. Do you want to address anything about how you vote and some of the things you've had the opportunity to stand up for since you have been in office?
Well, sure. This has come up more than once, and of course, just this past week, there was a number of changes proposed. I voted against them all, unfortunately, and I will say not every Republican, but the vast majority, overwhelming majority of Republicans voted against these proposals. Unfortunately, they passed through the House. So again, we find ourselves, dependent upon the Senate to stand in the way of this bad policy. And I like you, am concerned. I know Republicans are negotiating, and I hope that they will stand up proudly and strongly for our Second Amendment rights and protect them. We know this president would welcome any proposal that would be made and sign it into law. So it is really in the hands of the senators to block, the inappropriate legislation. And just so the listeners know, a few of the proposals that were in the bills that have passed, increasing the age for purchasing a firearm to 21, or a semi-automatic rifle or a shotgun, that is, and outlawing the kit guns that I know a lot of people buy the parts for and or take great pride in building their own gun at home. Would end that, and several other, multi-round magazines that lots of people have in their possession and take pride in, and use for sporting and for other purposes, and to frankly and have on hand to defend themselves. And then and then a different bill we passed would put in place several of the so-called red flag provisions. And I think there is probably some room in that area to at least consider what might be done in terms of how we make sure that mentally ill people don't get their hands on guns. But these approaches that are currently being taken, where without due process, someone can just take away your right to purchase a gun just based on accusations or assertions that may come in from unidentified parties. These are not the ways to do this. So, I think we have to continue to have an open mind. Is there something we can do to keep weapons away from mentally ill people? I would consider, and that I hope that doesn't shock you, but I'm open to studying that question.
Oh,
but
absolutely.
Not at the expense of Second Amendment,
Absolutely.
depriving, law-abiding citizens of their Second Amendment rights. And so, but these bills pass, and they've passed through the House before, and I vote against them, and there was no negotiation on the House side, which is seen throughout this, this Congress and the last while I've been serving. They brought the bills that they wanted to the floor without really any debate anywhere, and then there was some speaking on the House floor, but not the kind of opportunity to look at these things that we would like to see, and that should come before any serious actions like this.
Well, and the one thing I do want to clarify is when we were talking about the legislation that might prevent those that are mentally ill from possessing firearms, there's the concern, I think, for many is, well, in our veteran community, you have soldiers that come back with PTSD, or they have some things that they need a counselor, and they're fine, but they don't like fireworks, or they don't. There's certain things that they kind of steer away from, and it's not that they're having some struggles mentally, but they're not mentally ill, and so that's where people get nervous when they do. That's why I think a lot of us that are Second Amendment people get real nervous about any time that the Congress or the Senate starts picking up gun legislation, is because when I understand keeping it out of the hands of the mentally ill, but how do you make that identifier? How do you determine who that is going to involve? And the military I have been having a veteran in my family. I know that anytime that they've served in a combat zone, it affects them. It affects them. And so
right.
That's a different classification, that people who they don't like the loud noises and things like that, and they go through some PTSD because they've been in combat. I've got a friend who actually had to take a life while he was serving, and so he has a whole different set of things he has to deal with. So that's where we get a little bit nervous when we start even having this conversation, But anyway, let's. Do you have anything you want to add to that before we move to another topic?
Well, no, I think we've covered it, and I just, I don't think the first the first reaction to these types of events should be to take away
No.
law-abiding citizens' rights. We just cannot let people who choose to violate the law cause those who follow the law to lose their rights.
Absolutely.
As the first answer. That just never is going to work, no matter what the right is. You have to, you just have to question why those on the left always turn to this first, and that's because they don't really value the rights and privileges that we have as Americans, and so they want to control the population, and they think that they're smart enough to figure out how to do that. I think history tells us that the American people need to steadfastly defend their freedoms and liberties, and that comes at a cost.
Yeah.
And we've talked about that before. We have to hear things we don't want to hear sometimes. That's part of the price we pay for the First Amendment.
Yep.
We have to know that people are going to make some decisions we wish they wouldn't make, but that's their freedom and as an American to do that.
Well, and let's go to a different topic. We're going to just kind of jump to something completely different before we completely run out of time. This is near and dear to my heart because I have a grandchild about to be born on July 7th, and my third, by the way, and the baby formula situation. This is something that your communications folks mentioned that you would want to speak to, but then I saw something over the weekend saying that they've reached some kind of an understanding with the plant that produces a lot of the baby formula. Can you speak to what's going on with that? Because anybody that's got little ones in their life that they might have need of this, it's enormous. It's crazy trying to find baby formula. One of the people at church, we're like all hunting trying to find baby formula for their little girl, and it's just nuts. What can you speak to that?
Well, sure, and this has affected my family, me and my family personally, directly, because we have a young son. Fortunately, he's over a year old, so as the parents know, he's eating solid food now, so we're not totally dependent, but he still has a bottle every now and then, and he has to have one of the sensitive stomach formulas that we found early on was the one that he tolerated the best, and your listeners who have children know this, and frankly, it was a lady in Tennessee with a young daughter from Gallatin who brought this to the national attention a few weeks ago because she posted on social media that she had to travel to 6 different stores, ultimately had to drive 3 hours to get formula. Think about that with the current price of gasoline, because her daughter had a special hypoallergenic formula that she needed. And I don't know how she's faring now, but right now, or as of a week ago or so, the out-of-stock rate was 74% nationally and 92% here in Tennessee. And Chelsea and I were just at the grocery store yesterday and saw that the shelves were bare there again for baby formula, and again don't have the formula that we use for Sam. And so the really stark thing that probably most listeners don't know unless you've followed this really closely, because the press, again, trying to protect, I think, the Biden administration, or just maybe not doing their jobs well, haven't really called attention to this. But the shortage was really driven by the closure of this Abbott Laboratories plant in Sturgis, Michigan, back in February. Consider that this is probably the fact that most people haven't heard. I gave a speech on the House floor about it last week. That plant supplied 20% of the nation's baby formula. 20%.
Wow.
And for those who get assistance through the Women, Infants, and Children program, 43% of the WIC-supported formula came from that Abbott plant. So the most vulnerable in our society, very dependent on what that plant produced. And yet the FDA comes in and shuts down that plant, and nobody called the White House, and this is the part that amazes me. Whoever the frontline people were at FDA, and certainly even the higher-ups, including the FDA administrator, they should have known this is going to present a national crisis. You cannot shut off 20% of the nation's baby formula supply, 43% for the WIC program, and not expect there to be a real problem. That happened in February, and no one sounds the alarm. And so we get all the way into May, and that plant is still not back up and going, and didn't open until weekend before this past weekend.
Right.
and when it will take weeks then for that formula to make its way to the marketplace. And people need to understand part of the reason it takes that delay is because there has to be some post-manufacture testing of that formula to make sure that it's not contaminated in some way. That's just a routine part of producing products like that, and happens at all food manufacturing facilities. And so you can't just make it and ship it the next day. You have to let it sit and then test to make sure that there's not problems that emerge a week or 2 or 3 out. And that's why there's that extended delay afterwards. But the point is, President Biden and his administration, the president didn't know about this until late April. Nobody alerted him, or he wasn't paying attention. I don't know which. Maybe he was busy the day they shut down 20% of the nation's baby formula manufacturing capacity, and no one thought, they should alert the president to that. But, somebody should have been calling, pardon me, somebody should have been calling the White House and saying, you all may want to know about this. We may need to do something. And then even after all of that elapsed time went by, when the White House was first approached about this, they laughed. They, on camera laughed about it as though it wasn't a really serious problem. Yeah. And I think this just underscores how out of touch this administration has become with the, with the struggles of everyday Americans dealing with the implications and the results of the bad policies that the Biden administration has put in place.
Well, and we're just the same as out of time, but as you say that too, I'm thinking about these folks. You mentioned the woman trying to go 6 hours to get baby formula with gas prices, and I think I'd be remiss if I didn't say, do you see any hope on the horizon of gas prices coming back down? Do you have any kind of inside, notion of what might give us some relief at the pump? Because it's insane. I mean, for people who are commuting to Nashville, oh my word, it's nuts.
It really is, and I don't see a lot of hope. I wish I had better news to provide, but this administration, even as this is unfolding, continues to put in place obstacles to American energy production. Just about 2.5 weeks ago, canceled the leases for the lease auctions for this year. And what's not seen is the behind-the-scenes actions that they're taking to deter in new investment in energy production in this country. The president was serious when he said he was going to kill fossil fuels. He is systematically, through his administration, implementing policies that make it darn near impossible to produce new energy, to develop new energy sources in this country. They're stopping they're stopping the secondary facilities as well, like pipelines and refineries, standing in the way of those parts of the production pipeline, and it ultimately is going to make this problem worse, not better.
What would this is just a little fantasy of mine, but what kind of numbers would we have to get in the election in the fall to be able to overturn the president? I mean, not overturn him, but I'm saying, to keep him from being able to veto something if it came out. What are those numbers? Because I don't stay studied up on it.
Yeah,
because they're huge.
You have to have a 2/3 majority in both houses of Congress. Yeah. So it's a pretty heavy lift.
I know.
We've seen some pretty dramatic electoral turn, so maybe.
Yeah, it's a dream. It's a dream. I know. As I was just sitting here thinking about that. Well, because when you have a country that is seeing what we're seeing, and people are seeing it in their pocketbook at the pump every time they pull up to there, you just never know, and you just never know. Because there's a lot of folks up for election in the fall, and you turn something like that over to where the House and the Senate could actually drive the ship for a little while. I don't know. It could happen. It could happen. God's in control. Or God can be in control if we'll get on our knees and pray for our country again, and maybe see if we can't get him to intervene on some of this stuff. I appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much for all you do. Any parting thoughts? We're a little over time, but any parting thoughts?
Just thank you to everyone listening for the opportunity to represent the 6th District of Tennessee.
And we appreciate you so much, and we've got you for a few more months. So
thank you, U-Turn. You have a wonderful day.
Give my best to Chelsea and the kiddos. God bless.
I will do so. Thank you.
Appreciate y'all. God bless. And as we make the exit and let the congressman take his leave, we do need to go ahead and do one more sponsor. Barry and Rebecca Richards with the Exit Realty Garden Gate team. My friends will tell you all about what's going on in the real estate market. And, it's so funny, the things we talk about when our family gets together. One of my daughter-in-law, one of her cousins just bought a home. And so we're talking about the implications of the fact that the interest rate's risen a little bit. And so you're kind of seeing the market, how it seems to have maybe settled a little bit in a lot of areas to where you're not getting as big of competitive bids and things like that. But Robertson County, you're still seeing that because Robertson County is such a hot property, and we'll get Barry and Rebecca in here to give them to give us a complete update on that. But with interest prices rising, that's going to affect how much more time it takes you to sell your property. And again, that's one of the main reasons why you need somebody like Barry on your team if you're selling property in particular, because we say this all the time. He's a marketer. He was a vice president of a marketing company for many years in Nashville, went full-time with real estate, I want to say probably about 4 years ago, I think. And they're doing just great business right now, he and Rebecca. Rebecca's on this, she does, of course, all of it. But she's been at this for over 20, she's been at this, they've been in Robertson County for over 20 years up in Cross Plains. They're one of us. She's been at this a long time, one of the first in the area to be a seniors real estate specialist. She's studying to make sure she knows what's going on when it comes to the legalese and the representation that you need on either side of the table. But having that specialty marketer that can make sure that everybody sees your property. He's a Zillow certified photographer, licensed and insured drone pilot, does the 360-degree virtuality home tour to make sure people can walk through your home without him if they can't conveniently walk through your home. They're the whole package. Great friends of mine. Barry and Rebecca Richards with the Exit Realty Garden Gate team. You can connect with them and see they specialize in Robertson County properties, but they also buy and sell in the surrounding counties across the state line up in Kentucky. You can connect with them at sellwithbecky.com, sellwithbecky.com, or robertsoncounty.com. Best way to connect with them, though, again, is sellwithbecky.com, sellwithbecky.com. Reach out to them today. And always, please thank them for sponsoring our little thing we call One Street Over. Thank you for joining us. Tomorrow, Dr. Chris Causey will be in the house. School board meetings tonight if you want to go check it out. But Dr. Causey will be here for his day. He comes in and joins us once a month, and we appreciate you joining us here on One Street Over. God bless. Have a fabulous day.